Thank you, Thomas. Next up, we have Jeff Dove, who's running from the 11th Congressional District. Jeff,
Alrighty, thanks Fairfax County Republican Committee. I'm Jeff Dove. I'm the Republican nominee for Congress in the 11th Congressional District. Thank you guys. I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland. Sorry, let me take off my glasses real quick. Claire. I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland. During my younger age years, I was actually attended 5 different high schools. My mother, for some reason, liked moving between Roanoke, Virginia, and the DC area. So I actually ended up graduating from high school at William Fleming in Roanoke, Virginia. After high school, I joined the U.S. Army, and I served in 2004 to 2007. I did 1 tour in Iraq, went on over 230 plus combat patrol missions, and was awarded the Combat Action Badge that I wear on my lapel for engagement in combat. In 2010, my wife Stephanie and I moved to Woodbridge, Virginia. In 2011, we were married. In 2011, we were married. Last year, we had our first child, Serenity. She's walking now, so I'm very terrified. I've been working in IT for the past 8.5 years as a database administrator, IT manager, so I'm very familiar with new age issues new age solutions for old problems, and that's what I'm running on. I am a problem solver. I've always worked in fields where you see the problem, fix the problem. See it, fix it. There's none of this, see the problem, oh, can I run on this and try to get votes? And if I can, I'll try to extend it past the election and just run on it again. There's none of that for me. I'm all about seeing the problem, solving the problem. So one of the things I'll say that the Democrats, it's very interesting. We're seeing their platform, it's playing itself out over the past few months. There's 4 things they are running on. They are running on impeachment, repealing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, open borders, and gun control. Those are the 4 things that they are running on. And I just want to touch on a couple of those things. With regards to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it's interesting. So my opponent voted against it, of course, thus voting against the people of his district, because we have businesses like AT&T and Capital One and BB&T Bank and PNC that all raised their wages to $15, or they gave bonuses to their employees, or they hired more employees, or they're giving more money to charity, or they're doing something with that money that they got from the tax cuts that is benefiting the community. But he voted against it. Okay, just think about that. He voted against all of us to get a better life, basically by voting against the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I'll say, you know, with the whole open borders thing, immigration has been a problem for 50, 60 years. This is probably the biggest problem of our time, and it's constantly just been kicked down the road and kicked down the road over and over again. And we keep electing the same officials over and over again, and they still have not solved the problem. I'm telling you, one of the first things I will do is, one of the solutions I've come up with is addressing the way the Social Security number is leveraged, right? Once you do that, then you can address so many other issues. One of them is immigration. And I want to start by doing a sure up of all the Social Security numbers to verify everybody is who they say they are. Like I said, once you do that, then you can address all these other issues like employment fraud, identity fraud as it relates to taxes. Why is it that the IRS is sending us an email earlier in the year, I don't know if all of you saw it, where they said, hey, do your taxes early so you can avoid being a victim of identity theft. That is not the solution by any stretch of the imagination. So that's something that that's something that I'm really focused on. With regards to gun control, I'm a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment. What's interesting is I've actually been promoting. I actually put out an op-ed recently where I talked about one of the things that we don't address with regards to these school issues that we've been having over the past few years is when the shooting in Texas occurred. The first thing I noticed, I don't know if it's my military background, the first thing I noticed about the building was the size. That building had to be 4 or 5 acres of land.
Yeah.
And they had 1,500 kids. Yeah. And you had maybe 2 people trying to protect all that property and people. There is no way in the world that is technically possible. Okay, there is no way you can do that. So one thing I'm proposing is we need to actually start treating these facilities like the large facilities they are. They are a large gathering every day. It's like when you have a small crafts fair, you'll have 1,000 to 2,000 people show up at that fair. How many law enforcement agents do you have at that particular location? We're having a small fair every day of the week in all of these schools around the country, but we don't treat them like that. And that's something that we need to get our minds around that and make a change. To talk about IT security again, it's interesting. In 2015, there was an OPM breach, and everybody's aware about that OPM breach, especially if you worked in the government.
What is that?
What
does that mean?
So OPM was Office of Personnel Management, and they had an IT breach where pretty much everybody that's ever worked for the federal government's information was lost online. And this is was that? Yeah. So this is 2015. Regardless of who it was, what's interesting is my opponent went on TV, talked about it, never really provided any solutions, and all of a sudden last week sends a letter to DOJ asking, hey, how did that breach happen? Once again, that's leading from behind, okay? I just want to, just really quickly, want to talk about how I win, right? The way I win is not TV. I'm not going to have enough money to do TV commercials. The thing is being on the ground and actually engaging every single person that I can engage in my district. I've been out door knocking since January this year, and it's crazy that I'm going to precincts where people are telling me they haven't been I'm the first politician they've seen in years. That should not be the case. And that's something that I'm addressing now. And I hope with you guys' help that I'll be able to address it even further. So that's how I plan to win. I want to tell one quick story about something that happened to me yesterday that shows the person that I am running against, who is one of the most hated congresspeople in the Commonwealth of Virginia on both sides of the aisle. Okay? I was invited by Dar Al-Noor Mosque in Manassas yesterday to speak to the community. He was invited, and also the Libertarian candidate was invited. I got there a little bit early, like I always do, because as you know, military, on time is late. So I'm there standing there talking to the community organizer, and one of his staff members comes up, and she says, oh, I'm with Congressman Connolly's campaign. And I say, hey, how you doing? I'm Jeff Dove. As soon as I say that, she freaks out. Oh my gosh, this is a political event. What are you guys doing? She runs and goes on her phone, and I guess calls his staff or calls him directly. I have no idea what happened. So I'm still talking to the community organizer guy. All of a sudden, she comes in and pulls him outside. I don't think anything of it at the time. About 10 minutes or so later, he comes back in and he's just laughing and he says, yeah, the congressman won't be participating today. And I said, what happened? Oh, he was just standing outside yelling at us for inviting you. And I said, wow, that is the act of a coward. Okay? I know what courage looks like, and it is not that. Okay? So real quick, when people say that I have no chance of beating this guy, he is clearly terrified to even be in the same building with me. What did he expect I was going to do? This is a place of worship. Do you think I was going to start cursing at him or something? Or start a fight or a ruckus in a place of worship? So that just shows he was willing to show how terrified he was of me instead of just going in there and talking to his constituents. So that shows he was avoiding the people. I'm one of his constituents. He avoided all of us. Okay? And that's the type of person I'm running against. Someone who lacks conviction and courage. And that is not me. So, real quick, I need to save time for questions. That's basically it. Right now, election November 6th. If you guys want to check out more information about me, it's www.doveforcongress.com.
Hey Jeff, I got a quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
So in 2004, Jerry Connolly had a hit and run And the people who he hit also wanted to meet him, but they couldn't meet him because he fled the scene. The only place they could meet him was in the courthouse. The judge let him off, and the judge said, Connolly's position and his duties have caused him to be oblivious to what is going on in his car. Is Jerry Connolly oblivious, and is he above the law, and how would you have handled that situation?
Clearly he is oblivious because, once again, he votes against the district constantly. He votes against us all the time and just stays with the party lines. You can basically look at every vote that Nancy Pelosi takes and see where she is to know where Connolly was at.
Yeah.
So he's completely oblivious to the needs of the people of his district, not just what's going on in his car. Now, to me, that looks like greasing the skids a little bit, in a sense, to be able to get off from doing something of that nature. But that also goes back to the character, and it shows what type of person that is to flee the scene of an accident.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I have the mic.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. I heard our amazing Secretary Ben Carson on the radio the other day talking about his Envision centers.
Okay.
Have you heard of those?
I have not, but
Because I think that is a really good item for your platform. Secretary Ben Carson is going around the country looking at areas that need to be revitalized, also helping certain populations with all of the things they have to do with getting jobs, getting training, etc. So of the 17, I don't know if one will be in Virginia, but it certainly is worth looking at and promoting.
so to that point, in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, way down in there was a proposal that Jack Kemp had thought about way back called urban revitalization zone, or sorry, he didn't call it that, but that's what they're being called now, urban revitalization zones. There's actually an urban revitalization coalition that the president has, that Pastor Darrell Scott, I believe, is heading up, where they are focused on getting capital gains money invested in areas that have lower than 20% poverty rates. Now, that's something you won't see on the news, but they are trying to build up those communities, and I can see part of what Dr. Carson is doing has to be tied to that. Because if you're doing training and you're also, giving businesses the opportunity to build themselves up, then it goes hand in hand. So it makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Hi, so your story about the mosque, to me, is so emblematic of the way that Democrats treat minority and ethnic voters. The outrage that they dared to invite his Republican opponent, and the fact that they feel they're entitled to minority vote. And this has bothered me as a Hispanic voter for a long time. And I'm wondering how you plan to reach out to minority communities and say, they need to earn your vote. You are not entitled, they're not entitled to your vote as a minority just because they're Democrats. How can we reach those communities and say, they're taking you for granted, they don't have your interests at heart?
So something that's been very encouraging over the past year is the fact that when I go to various minority communities and talk to different groups, they are very receptive of me. Maybe not, they have this view of the Republican Party at large as not being very inclusive, but when they see me and they start talking to me and Thomas, they see that goes against, that shoots that narrative in the foot. That we have major metropolitan, we're in a major metropolitan area, and both of us were able to win nominations, right? This doesn't just happen overnight. It took a lot of work in order to get to this point where we are. And it took a lot of people who are not all the racists like they say we are to get us to this point. So I think just getting in front of people is the biggest thing. Hopefully later this year we'll be doing a big town hall at George Mason, which will hopefully bring in a lot of people. We'll probably work with the college Republicans and the college Democrats. I don't care who shows up. I'm not just running to represent Republicans or independents or Democrats. I am running to represent everyone in this district, just like I did when I fought for the United States of America.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Oh, 2 questions, okay.
Future Congressman, Dove.
I like how that sounds.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
You went to William Fleming School.
Yes.
My name's Dean Fleming. What a coincidence. I went to Washington Lee High School. I proudly wear this hat. At this time, we've got school boards that are pretty much run amok with their virtue signaling and attempts to force their agenda down the people's throat. 85 to 90% of the people do not want to change the names of these schools that need changed. For example, in Tampa, Florida, in a largely minority school district, 89% voted not to change the name, 88.5% of Hispanics voted not to change the name, and 65.5% of Black African Americans voted not to change that name. And outside of Richmond, recently they changed the name of a school in Northside that was named after Robert E. Lee, and the children voted to name it Northside. The school board decided to name it Obama, which would be fine if that was the community consensus. The Arlington School Board just voted in an illegal vote that wasn't on the agenda, that wasn't supposed to take place till December, change the name of Washington High School. What would you do to stop that type of process?
So one of the biggest things that I've been talking about since February last year when I announced is the fact that we need to call out the Democrats for their constant failures. Something that we don't do enough of is go after them on what they've been doing, right? They've been in charge of the school boards in Fairfax and Prince William County for quite a long time. I actually had to call them out at an NAACP meeting when I was the only Republican there. Had to call them out at the NAACP meeting when there was a superintendent, a few members of the school board, board of supervisors members there, because they were complaining about issues that had been in place for years, and they did nothing about them. So with all these problems that are out there, how do the school name changes somehow get to the forefront? There's so many more issues. I literally sat in a school board debate last August, and a kid said as the question, how do we make sure that we have supplies in our classroom in Fairfax County? How does that make any sense? To that man's point earlier about not having enough housing for veterans and seniors in Fairfax County. This is one of the richest counties in the United States. How is a kid going to class saying that they don't have supplies? That makes absolutely no sense to me. So there's so many more issues that we need to go after these school boards. Next year, when the school board is up, we need to really have candidates that go after them hard. Yes, sir.
So all politics is local. Mr. Conley has been around for a long time, and I am so glad that you're running, because we need competition. So I would like to know some specific issues that you will improve the lives of District 11 that have been currently neglected by the current Congress president.
Oh, there's so many. So he's been in office for about 10 years, and he just had his third bill signed into law recently, and it was an extension on a previous piece of legislation that someone else wrote. So one of the things that like I mentioned earlier about the Social Security issue, that issue is near and dear to my heart because of the fact that I've been a victim of identity fraud, and I've talked about this quite a bit. I actually did a town hall on it back in January. I'm proposing that there be multi-factor authentication tied to every transaction related to the Social Security number. So every time it's used, you have to provide multiple forms of authentication. There's not going to be any, oh, I just know the Social Security number and that person's address and their date of birth, and I can just open a credit card account. That's not going to be the case, and that's something that I'll really be fighting for. Like I said, day one, I want the Social Security Administration to be responsible for protecting Americans, because our primary responsibilities as elected officials are the physical and digital security of all Americans, and the digital piece gets forgotten about. And there's one more question right there. Yep. Running low on time.
What is your position on social issues, most notably the abortion issue, pro-life issues?
I'm very pro.
I think you're pro-life, but
I'm very pro-life. I would say that's one of the primary things that pushes me toward being a conservative. My wife and I actually tried for about 6 years to have our daughter, so I'm very familiar with how much of a blessing a child is, and I don't take that lightly at all. And so you see all the Democrats are going nuts because we have another Supreme Court justice that's coming our way. But we'll see what that happens. Just like to thank you guys once again. God bless you all. God bless the Commonwealth of Virginia. God bless America.
Okay, great job by our candidates.